Welcome back to the Nebraska Football Show. As always, I'm Tim Verghese, joined by Steve Marik. Steve, it's been a couple weeks since we've done one of these. I think we're both a little bit rusty because of been a lot, on our minds this month. A lot we've been dealing with just with the transfer portal, with high school recruiting, and obviously with you with basketball season and obviously the volleyball season as well. It's been a lot this month. For some it may even be like, oh, Nebraska still has another game. I mean, it's been a while since they played in one of these bowl games, so. Steve, kind of how are you feeling? Obviously, you and I have kind of talked off camera a little bit, but yeah, it's kind of weird to be like, okay, we're back in this bowl game mode, but it's kind of hard to talk about both teams right now.
I'm in the group that is feeling like, oh, we still have like a football game to play. We should probably start like talking about like Boston College and think about like the game and how Nebraska is going to win it. So yeah, it's been a wild month of December, especially with the transfer portal, the comings and goings, the roster reconstruction, the coaching movement. There's just so much else happening. It's hard to kind of focus on the football game that's going to be played at Yankee Stadium December 28th. But yeah, I'm excited to kind of go through. I think it's going to be good, Tim, to kind of help maybe fans just kind of see, and hear who's going to be on the field for Nebraska. So we'll go through each position and talk about like who we're expecting to see out there, which names, maybe some young guys out there who are going to be playing more snaps than they did during the regular season. So it's fun in that aspect of like, thinking about who else we could see out there, which young guys could see, and also talk about the departures and who you're not going to see out there because there's a group of them.
For sure. And, I think we can get into like a little bit of the Boston College element of it too, but they've also dealt with their own, transfer portal coming and goings. They have some future pros on that roster that could ultimately not play or be limited. So, I think, yeah, like you said, kind of dive into the Nebraska side of this just because it's going to look so new. It's not going to look like the team we saw all year in 2024. This almost feels like a bridge kind of between the 2024 team and the 2025 team. It's a good opportunity, offensively, to see Dana Holgerson's offense kind of fully in action. They've had a full, kind of month to kind of fully install the offense and fully integrate, themselves into that offense. So I think we can start there. Obviously, expecting Dylan Raiola at quarterback. But the big change in the QB room, Heinrich Haarberg won't be in the QB room.
Yeah, he's going to be in the tight end room. So Matt Rule said that, if they need him, Heinrich Haarberg is going to be available at quarterback, and he can go back there and run his usual Heinrich Haarberg type stuff with some QB read stuff, some QB power, whatever you want to call it. But Jalen Gramstad, the former NAIA All-American Player of the Year, he's the number 2 quarterback going into this game. So it's going to be, if you're looking at the depth chart, Dylan Raiola, obviously as a starter, but then Jalen Gramstad is getting that opportunity to, if Dylan gets hurt, God forbid, or if his helmet pops off and somebody else needs to come in and take the snap, it's probably going to be Jalen Gramstad. So that's going to be interesting and a cool thing for him, especially his knowing his background and how much being at Nebraska and spending one season there is meaning to him. So that's a cool thing in Nebraska's quarterback room. So Dylan Raiola, Jalen Gramstad as his top backup, and then Heinrich Haarberg, going to be interesting to see how often he's used at the tight end spot. And it's a position that he's done before, just not very much of in a game. I know 2 seasons ago he took some reps as kind of like that offline tight end, that H back, going across the line, catching a first down pass from Jeff Sims. So he has experience doing that, just not a whole lot. So that transition, Heinrich Haarberg's from quarterback to tight end for the 2025 season, is well underway. So it's going to be interesting to see a Heinrich Haarberg flavor in the tight end room.
For sure. And looking at the running backs, going to see more Emmett Johnson. He's back, after a brief entry into the transfer portal. Expecting to see a whole lot of Emmett Johnson, especially after the way he kind of ended the regular season, playing in Dana Holgerson's offense. And, I think you're going to get a good look at what, Nebraska's the future of this backfield looks like between Dylan Raiola and Emmett Johnson, two key pieces to the future of this offense. Behind, I think the question for most people is behind Johnson. Who do we see? Is it going to be Ramir Johnson? Obviously, Dante Dowdell's off to Kentucky. We've got Quentin Ives has gotten some
Mhm.
praise for his practice behind the scene. Makai Nelson. Kind of who are you expecting? When Emmett Johnson is not on the field?
Yeah, so if it's not Emmett Johnson, I think Ramir Johnson, just because of how much respect Matt Rule and that offensive staff have for Ramir. And come on, like it's a bowl game. I know that everybody wants to see the young guys, but Ramir Johnson has fought through so much, all the injuries that he's had throughout his season. He kept coming to work, he kept coming back. He kept putting in the hours, and the care factor with him is through the roof. And plus, he's at home. He's going to have a
Yeah,
lot of family members, a lot of former coaches, a lot of friends in the stadium wanting to see him get some carries. So behind Emmett Johnson, you got to think Ramir Johnson is going to be getting is going to have a big role in that bowl game. But also, it's hard not to be intrigued by what Quentin Ives is going to be doing in the bowl game. But also Makai Nelson too. Tim, you know more about Makai than I do, but yeah, for that with Dowdell off to Kentucky, with Gabe Ervin transferred out of the program, I think he's still looking for a landing spot. Who's that big back? And right now, that big back is Quentin Ives at 6'3", 210 pounds. He just doesn't look like all the other running backs in that room. So he brings a little bit different of a flavor. So I'm interested to see what Quentin Ives looks like with like behind that first team offensive line, because in the spring games, we've seen Quentin Ives out there. He didn't really flash too much, didn't really look like there was a lot there, but he was also playing behind like a second or third team offensive line and just getting contacted, right when he got the football. At least that's how I remember it from April's spring game. But Quentin Ives, Makai Nelson, those two guys are going to be. I think it's big moments for them because this is their opportunity to show the coaching staff like, hey, I deserve a spot on this roster next year.
for sure. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, this month is it's a kind of a tryout period for some of these guys on the fringe of the roster to kind of prove that they belong. Obviously, with these 105 roster limits, there's going to have to be some cut downs somewhere, largely from the walk-ons. But there are going to be some unfortunate. We've seen a bit of it already, but kind of going into the spring and everything, I think you're going to see some unfortunate, developments, at the bottom of the roster. I think we can kind of lump in wide receiver and tight end, just talking about some of the outgoing guys.
Yeah.
Isaiah Nair won't be playing. He's opting out. He's ramping up for the NFL. And at tight end, Nate Borkershires out, but Heinrich Haarberg's in. What are you expecting from this pass catching group? I'm assuming we'll see Jamal Banks. I think this is a good opportunity for him to continue to kind of show some stuff to NFL scouts. Obviously, Ja'Cory Barney, expecting a lot from him. Are you expecting any new wide receiver coach in the room again? A full month in Dalen Holgerson's system. Are you expecting anything new? Are you expecting, new looks, new routes, new just like players out there potentially?
I do, but not maybe a lot. I expect to see a lot of the same things. I expect that Dana Holgerson is going to want to continue keeping it simple so Dylan Rell can play and think fast, and the receivers can play fast as well. So, but of course, I mean they've had all month to practice and put in new stuff. So I'm sure that we're going to see some minor tweaks here and there for sure. So what that is, I don't know. That's the exciting thing. So we're gonna have to just wait and find out. But yeah, you mentioned the tight end room with Nate Borkature off to Texas A&M. That leaves Thomas Fidone, Luke Lindemeyer as the top two guys, but also that Heinrich Haarberg addition. So that's going to be interesting. And then with the receivers, you mentioned Isaiah Nair. He's opting out for to focus on the NFL. But then there are also two departures. Seldom used guys, both from Bellevue West, Davon Hall, Isaiah McMorris. They both transferred out. They're still looking for landing spots. So that leaves Jamal Banks, Ja'Cory Barney, Jalen Lloyd as kind of like your top two targets, in my opinion. Behind those guys, IGC, Isaiah Garcia Castaneda. He's playing in his final game as a Husker. Then in the slot, Janarian Bonner. We'll see what Carter Nelson's going to do, how much Carter Nelson's going to play. And then Jalen Lloyd, Alex Bullock, maybe some Jaden Doss action, Tim. Who knows? He started his career as a receiver. Matt Rule flipped him to the defensive side as a corner, didn't really stick, and it appeared that he kind of made his way back to the wide receiver room late in the year during the regular season. So we'll see what Jaden Doss is looking like, but also the young guys like Quinn Clark, Keelan Smith, those true freshmen, high ceiling guys, maybe just a lot of talent to work with right there, but we just haven't seen a ton of them in a game yet. But so this would be a perfect opportunity to throw them out there, see what they can do, make their case that that they can be difference makers in the room for next year. But then also just thinking ahead to the 2025 season. He's not going to be playing in the bowl game because he's still recovering from his knee injury. But Demetrius Bell, Demetrius Bell was somebody who had a great spring ball until he had that season-ending injury in the spring game. He'll be back full. Well, supposedly he'll be back next season, and that's one that interests me too, just because of what the coaches said about him, what his teammates said about him. So Demetrius Bell is one to keep an eye on as well for next season.
For sure, yeah. And I think, looking at Bell and some of the offensive line, I think that's stuff we can probably get into in the spring, just because right now I think there's some of that we're going to see. We're not going to see them a whole lot of changes on the offensive line. I think in the bowl game, I think it's going to be the same unit out there on Saturday. I do wonder, talking receivers, I think for me, the intrigue is how much Carter Nelson do we see? How much Quinn Clark do we see? And how much Jaden Doss do we see? Like you mentioned, those three names I think are the ones that really intrigue me on
Yeah.
Saturday, of just how much we see, because I could see any one of those three stepping into a bigger role and making their case
Mm-hmm.
to, potentially earn some even an even bigger role in 2025. And I also wouldn't count out Jalen Lloyd. I think him getting this opportunity is big for him. I think he's every time he's gotten the ball, he's produced, and he's
Yeah.
a guy that still has kind of an unbelievable yards per catch uh number. Kind of just it's pretty much every time you get the ball to him, it's an explosive
Yeah.
play more often than not. So interested to see how much we get from him. I'd love to see more Jalen Lloyd and Ja'Cory Barney packages where you get both of those guys out in space, kind of burning DBs. But yeah, I think we can probably flip over to the defensive side of the ball where there's a lot of
Let
changes.
let's yeah, before we do that, let's go through the offensive line. So Micah Mizuka, he's not going to be playing because he played through a labrum injury
Oh yes,
um
yes.
during the regular season. He's not playing because he had surgery to fix that. Tyler Canuck, backup offensive lineman, he hasn't been active for a while now. He's out with an injury, so we're not going to see him. And I bring up Tyler Canuck just because of the right tackle situation, which I think Tyler Canuck, if he was fully healthy and something happened to Bryce Barnhart and he couldn't go, I think Tyler Canuck might be that right tackle on the field for the Huskers. But let's start on the left side with the tackle spot. Gunnar Gatula, with Micah Mizuka not out there, not available. Micah Mizuka was, he started the season at right guard. He started rotating in after he lost his job to Henry Lutovsky. He started rotating in with Gunnar Gatula at left tackle, but it looks like it's going to be Gunner's show at left tackle with Micah not available. Moving down the line, left guard Justin Evans. He's been there for a while. He's kind of cemented himself as that starting left guard. But then behind him, according to the depth chart, Jason Machachok from South Dakota, a young guy who came to the program originally as an offensive lineman, quickly changed to defensive lineman just because they needed some depth and some size back there. But now he's been over to the offensive side for a while now, and that's kind of like where his future is, I believe. But he's one that's always kind of intrigued me just because of his size and how well he moves and his footwork and how quick it is for somebody his size and his strength. I mean, I think he has kind of like a crazy bench stat. I forget what it was. I think he did like a crazy amount of 225 on the bench last couple years ago as a high schooler. But starting at center, Ben Scott, his final game as a Husker. Then behind him, if Ben Scott can't go at center for some reason, I think Justin Evans would be that top pick to kind of bump down and be that center. And then behind him, probably Sam Sledge. We just haven't seen a lot of Sam Sledge. If you're going to be an offensive lineman in the Big Ten, you just need some seasons of weight room and development before you play. So we'll see about Sam Sledge. But yeah, right guard, I mentioned him already, Henry Lutovsky. And then making his appearance on the depth chart for this bowl game right behind Henry Lutovsky at right guard, Grant Bricks. What do you think of that, Tim?
Yeah, very interesting, especially at
Mm-hmm.
that position, because I think
Yep.
that's a guy that long term they still see outside, and a guy that, I think they're still very, very high on. But intriguing to see him in the two deep, intriguing to see kind of
Mm-hmm.
what he looks like in the spring, because it's going to be a critical spring for him, because there's going to be snaps available either at guard or tackle, and he's got an opportunity to earn some playing time. But yeah, I are we going to see his debut? Do you think we see a little Graham Bricks?
I think we do. I think we do. Whether that's like as a sixth tight end, out there leading the way on a run in a short yardage or goal line situation, whatever it is, I think that they give Grant Bricks a couple snaps for whatever reason, just because of, he's spent the season behind the scenes developing. It needs to get bigger, stronger, and just kind of refine his pass blocking techniques and his pass blocking ability, but run blocking, I think, that's his thing. And so I think that, if the situation calls for it, I think we could see Grant Bricks and kind of that sixth offensive lineman slash tight end package that Matt Rule has shown to like. Let's switch over to the defensive line, Tim. First of all, let's just talk about the guys who are out and not playing. Jamari Butler, he transferred to LSU. James Williams, he transferred to Florida State to follow Tony White and his defensive line coach, Tony Knighton, or I guess Terrence Knighton, not Tony Knighton. Vincent Jackson, seldom used backup. He transferred to UConn. Brody Tagaloa also transferred out of the program. And then Kai Wallen, depth piece at defensive end. He transferred to Oregon State to go play for Trent Bray, former Husker assistant Trent Bray. So who's going to be playing? Ty Robinson's going to be playing. Keona Davis is going to be playing. Nash Hutmacher will play. Elijah Judy will play. Dylan Parrott will play. He's been a backup kind of interior lineman that the staff really likes. He came to the program as a walk-on. He's from Iowa, former offensive lineman. But then elsewhere at defensive end, Cam Lenhart will play. Riley Van Poppel will play. And I bet we see some Mason Goldman. So shout out the Gretna community. Mason Goldman kind of got to the program. He's a young guy, suffered a back injury, needed surgery, but now he's back and kind of learning and developing as a defensive lineman. I bet Mason Goldman gets out there for a few snaps.
Yeah, for sure. Again, even with some of the departures, just having Nash and Ty out there, you're still expecting, quality defensive line play, even if they're not as deep as they once were.
Yeah.
I'm expecting a good bit of, again, and typically, you see these type of games, guys that are future pros sometimes opt out. We obviously saw that with Isaiah Nair and other programs. You see that happen.
Mm-hmm.
For Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmacher, they've never had the opportunity to play in a bowl game. I expect a whole lot of them, and I expect them to, kind of play with their hair on fire a little bit, kind of leave with a bang, leave a lasting impression with the program. But I expect a lot of Riley Van Poppel. I think we're going to see more of him. I think this month has been big for Keona Davis. Just getting, a couple more practices under him, getting a little more comfortable in the system. And yeah, like you mentioned, outside of that, it's a whole lot of who knows,
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. And you mentioned it, you bring up a good point, Tim, where opt-outs are so prevalent in today's college football. But at Nebraska with Ty Robinson, Nash Hutmacher, those guys have had so many losing seasons. They have lost so many games in their college football career. They have never made the bowl game until right now. You can't tell me that they're going to go out there and play with their hair on fire. I think that Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmacher are going to want to continue to get over that hump. They got over it by actually qualifying for a bowl game, and now get over it by winning one. So I think, Tim, the last bowl game win for Nebraska was 2015 against UCLA. So yeah, the last made it in 2016. They lost to Tennessee. And then before that, I think it was a win against UCLA in the Foster Farms Bowl. So we can, with Ty Robinson, this being his last game, Nash Hutmacher, this being his last game, Nebraska is currently in the process of retooling the defensive line with the transfers, Williams and Wari, Jalen George from East Tennessee State, Gabe Moore from Mississippi State, and even Dasan McCullough. We'll wait and see what he ultimately ends up playing at Nebraska. Could be several different positions because he's a stud. But yeah, I mean, this is perhaps Ashton Murphy gets some snaps. He's a true freshman out of Elkhorn South who has plenty of development left to do. Then David Hofken from Germany. Will we see the German out there, Tim? I don't know.
I don't know, maybe a full season, maybe, at this point, a full season and 15 extra practices has them up to speed. But yeah, I mean, they're lacking in depth, so they, we could see a whole bunch of different names out there. Are you expecting a whole lot of changes in the linebacker room? Obviously, Mekhi Bear's gone. I'm expecting Vincent Shavers to kind of step into that role. But beyond that, I mean, MJ Sherman's going to play a jack. Willis McGahee's going to play behind him. Looking in the linebacker room, John Bullock's going to want to play and, want to play well. Because he's still trying out for, kind of a potential, NFL or, future pro, trying to press scouts. So expecting some Bullock, obviously expecting more Vincent Shavers. I think that's what I'm most excited for.
Yeah.
Kind of because we've seen some flashes, but would like to see him put it together kind of consistently.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so just going through the room, who's out Mekhi Bear is out. He transferred to Missouri. Steph Thompson is out. He transferred to Florida State to play for Tony White, who he has a really good connection with since his Syracuse days. So who's going to be playing? John Bullock is going to be playing. Javen Wright is going to be playing. Vincent Shavers is going to be playing. Vincent Genatone, who came over from
Hmm.
Montana. He played some seasons of high school football at North Platte. Just a guy with a huge high care factor. He's super athletic. That I'm guessing we're going to be seeing some Vincent Genatone personally, but also Dylan Rogers, Gage Stanger. There's some depth pieces at inside linebacker who are going to be getting their opportunities and kind of showing what they can do for the coaches. But then at Jack linebacker, Principal Uman Mielen transferred to Ole Miss to play where his brother played this season. So MJ Sherman's going to get a lot of snaps. Willis McGahee's going to get a lot of snaps. Maverick Noonan, Ishmael Smith Flores, who's a converted tight end who switched over to Jack linebacker this season. Even Jordan Ochoa, who knows, walk on from Colorado. He's been taking some. He's been practicing as a Jack linebacker at Nebraska. So I expect to see a lot of John Bullock against Boston College, Javen Wright, Vincent Shavers, obviously, MJ Sherman, Willis McGahee. But thinking ahead, kind of closing your eyes and imagining what this Jack outside linebacker room is going to be looking like in 2025, there just seems to be like a need there, right, Tim? Somebody in the transfer portal I think Nebraska really needs, and they understand that they've had some guys come in for transfer visits, but haven't really landed anyone yet. Obviously, Dasan McCullough could change that if he ends up playing a Jack or outside linebacker. But Tim, what do you see from the edge spot on Nebraska's defense? What do you see from the outside linebacker position?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the bowl game, obviously, it's going to be okay. I mean,
Yeah.
I still like the room the way it's set up. But yeah, long term, I want to see how they continue to address it. Potentially you could see Jalen George kind of step into potentially that MJ Sherman role. Probably going to see a lot more Willis McGahee in 2025. But when you listen to John Butler and Matt Rule and they talk about what they want the future of this defense to look like, they're going to play at the end. And the fact that they hired Phil Simpson, like a true outside linebackers coach, not just a Jacks coach, they're going to play with more traditional outside linebackers. And I think that's going to be a need they're going to have to address through the transfer portal or, potentially, hey, let's accelerate the timeline on Christian Jones and Dawson Merritt and
Mm-hmm.
potentially even Pierce Blueberry. Those guys kind of need to put on some weight, learn
Mm-hmm.
the technique a little bit. Specifically, Dawson and Pierce need to put on some weight
Yeah.
to be able to play Jack or outside linebacker consistently at the Big Ten level. But you know, I, again, like you said with Deshaun McCullough, I think that's a guy that they want to move around the defense, more of a
Yeah.
versatile piece. But he can
Mm-hmm.
rush the passer. He can do some stuff at Jack. I just don't know if that's the permanent plan for him, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
permanent position because I think he's best utilized when he can line up at a couple of different spots in your back seven, I guess is the best way to put it. But speaking of transfer portal needs, um, defensive back. Defensive back is going to be, I think more of the same for the most. No Tommy Hill, which, unfortunate kind of. And I'll say this, we've talked about this a bit during the season. I really do feel bad about the way this season has gone for Tommy. Had a really good opportunity, had some first round buzz entering the year, had a really good opportunity to keep doing that, had a very good performance against Colorado, but just hasn't gotten over the injury bug. It's just been one thing after another, it feels like with him. So he's shut down for the year, hoping, come the turn of the calendar, come the Senior Bowl and some of these opportunities he'll get, that he can kind of improve that draft stock and potentially work himself back into at least mid-round level, conversations. Um, but beyond him, kind of what are you looking for in the secondary this week?
Yeah, so who's not going to be playing? So Tommy Hill, obviously, you mentioned him. He's opting out just to focus on getting that foot healthy and then the NFL. Kobe Brett's a backup safety has also entered the transfer portal. He didn't play a whole lot during the season anyway, but just letting everyone know that he's out of the room. Sierra Wright, he'll be starting at corner. Malcolm Hartzog will be starting at corner, but then behind him, Bly Hill will be there. Amari Sanders is listed right behind Malcolm Hartzog on the depth chart that Nebraska released. And take this take it with a grain of salt. Depth charts aren't the end all be all. They aren't like the blueprint that everybody should follow point by point. But Amari Sanders is listed behind the starter Malcolm Hartzog and in front of the redshirt freshman Jeremiah Charles. So this might be a big game for Jeremiah Charles. Might be a big December month of practice for Jeremiah Charles just to show the coaches that he deserves a spot on the roster and continues to develop. But also Larry Tarver is going to be in the conversation too, if he's healthy, and I think he is. So Larry Tarver is going to be in the conversation next season, absolutely. So yeah, Sierra Wright, Bly Hale, Malcolm Hartzog, Amari Sanders, Jeremiah Charles, all those guys, Larry Tarver. There's a lot of interesting young guys in that room, namely Amari Sanders, Larry Tarver. Those two are who I'm like wanting to see out there the most with like a sustained amount of snaps, not just like one or two here and there. I want to see what those guys can do.
For sure, yeah, and obviously because it's the last game, we're going to see a lot of Gifford and Singleton and those guys. But I do expect, some young flavor out there, just because this is again like a transition point for Nebraska to kind of set things up for the 2025 season. And yeah, I'm intrigued by Larry Tarver. We haven't seen a whole
Mm-hmm.
lot of him this year.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I feel like we've seen him in practice, he's been injured. But a guy with a lot of natural talent, just like Amari Sanders,
Mm-hmm.
two South Florida kids, can compete. That's the biggest thing with them is they compete. They fight for the ball. They're sticky in coverage. They're athletic. So yeah, intrigued to see how much we see of both those guys. This is a breakout opportunity for Amari Sanders, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I hope. I really hope to see him out there. I just don't know how much, Nebraska's going to want to win this football game, and to
For
win the
sure.
football game, you need to play your top corners. So right now, that'd be like, in my opinion, Sierra Wright, Malcolm Hartzog. I know the fan base has a love-hate kind of relationship with Malcolm Hartzog, but he plays hard. Leads the team in interceptions. He's a ball hawk. He's just kind of always around the ball. He makes plays, but sometimes he has plays made over top of him because he's 5'9". But he plays hard at the end of the day, so I think he's going to be out there just because Nebraska really wants to win this game and really kind of go into the offseason saying you have a bowl win under the belt, getting a seventh win and all that good stuff that you can pitch in transfer portal meetings and everything like that. But let's move on to the safety spots, Tim. Like I mentioned, Brett's not around anymore. Omaha West Side product transferred out. So Marquez Buford Jr. is going to be starting. I'm sure Deshaun Singleton will have his boundary corner position locked down. But then behind them, behind Marquise Buford Jr. is Mario Buford, his younger brother. DeAndre Barnes is probably behind there too somewhere. So a couple young guys right there. Deshaun Singleton behind him, listed on the depth chart. Caleb Benning. So shout out Caleb Benning. That's another interesting one, another good piece for the future. But then also Donovan Jones, I hope to see. Braylon Prude, I want to see out there just because he's huge and he's like a safety right now. So yeah, I mean, Caleb Benning, Donovan Jones, Braylon Prude, those three guys at the safety/slash rover spots, where they end up. We can talk about rover after the safety spot, but yeah, Tim, what do you think about that safety group? Marquise Buford Jr., Mario Buford, DeAndre Barnes. I don't know how much we're going to see of DeAndre Barnes. Haven't heard a whole lot about him this season, but then Deshaun Singleton, Caleb Benning, Donovan Jones, Braylon Prude, a lot of interesting names.
Yeah, expecting more of the veterans here, just because again, like you said, Nebraska's trying to win this game. They've leaned on the veterans for a reason. But I wonder how much rotation we get. I think we're going to see a little more of the young guys than we have in previous games. Especially with the coordinator change, especially with the secondary coach change,
Mm-hmm.
as well. As kind of Addison Williams gets his feet wet and adjust to his new personnel. I again, this is a conversation for the offseason because we'll have so much time this offseason to talk about this roster.
Mm-hmm.
I'm intrigued what Deshaun McCullough can do for Braylon Prude, just in the sense that it's always good to have someone else on the roster that kind of looks like you, that can do things like you can, and is versatile. I wonder how much Deshaun McCullough, like Nebraska, kind of pairs those two up this offseason. That's what I want to see. I want to see those two paired up this offseason, kind of working through a couple different positions, and Prude kind of in this essentially this developmental, like just following in the footsteps of a guy that's done it at a high level at a couple of different positions and showcase that like length and versatility and athleticism combination that had Nebraska so intrigued by Prude when he was coming out of high school. Rover, it's going to be Isaac Gifford. I think that's just
Yep.
it's going to be
Yep.
Gifford. I think we're going to see a lot of Gifford. Just because I don't know who else on the roster right now can adequately hold their own in that critical position. That's just going to be something again. I think they're going to address in the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get out of here, Steve, I do want to touch a little bit on just this game overall and Boston College's side of it. We know what Boston College is. They're, a hard-nosed physical team led by Bill O'Brien. They're going to run the football. They're going to defend the
Mm-hmm.
run well. It's not going to be easy for Emma Johnson necessarily to just get some good looks. It's going to be, kind of going to have to set him some up on some screens. Um, Catch the defenses kind of, on their heels a little bit in the run game. What are the keys? I guess the best way to put it, what are the keys to Nebraska winning this game with so much uncertainty on both sides of the ball? Because again, with on Boston College's end, no Thomas Castellanos.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. One of the keys that comes to mind right away that Nebraska needs to be aware of on the offensive side of the ball is where Donovan Ezeraku is. So Donovan Ezeraku, for those who don't know, he is the star edge rusher, outside linebacker for Boston College. He's 6'2". He's about 250 pounds. He's a local guy from New Jersey. Get this, Tim, 28 career sacks for Donovan Ezeraku. This guy is a stud. He had 16 and a half sacks to go along with 80 tackles in the regular season. So Donovan Ezeraku, Nebraska's pass protection, the edges, whether that's Bryce Benhart on the right side or Gunnar Gatula on the left side. Maybe we're going to see some chips from the running backs, from the tight ends to try to help those tackles kind of take care of business against Donovan Ezeraku, because he is a game changing player. He is a guy who can wreck a game plan if you let him, because of his ability to get into the backfield, raise havoc, impact the quarterback. And so it just that's the top one. What about you?
Yeah, same. I mean, obviously keeping an eye on that, and you obviously have to account for him, and it's a good test, wherever he lines up. Again, it could be Gunnar Gatula with his hands full in his first,
Yeah,
first time in a while, kind of getting all of the reps at tackle. Um, and for Nebraska, I think offensively, I'm very, very intrigued to see what 15 extra practices means for Dylan Raiola and Dalen
sure.
Holgorsen and this offense. How many
Mm-hmm.
points can they put up? How many yards can they put up? I wouldn't be surprised if, because it's going to be something kind of new for them. I wouldn't be surprised if they throw a bunch of new looks out there, try and give Boston College some fits and catch them on their heels. I think Nebraska is going to take the fight to them. And defensively, I just need to see how they hold up, because they lack the depth they had all year. And we know how much Nebraska likes to rotate and get fresh bodies in there, especially up front. And they just don't have the depth they once did. But, Nash and Ty, we know what they can do just on their own. Expecting John Bullock, Isaac Gifford, Marcus Buford, Javen Wright too. All these guys playing in their basically one of their last games as Huskers in a bowl game,
Yep.
something they've been fighting for. I think they're all going to play with their hair on fire. How much will it matter? We'll just have to see, because yeah, this Boston College offense, they can run on you. They've got some talent out in the perimeter too.
Yeah, absolutely. And, they're going to want to run, like you said, Tim. The lead back is Kyle Robichaux, 6 foot, nearly 220 pounds. He's from Columbus, Georgia, just a downhill guy. But then also, you mentioned earlier, no Thomas Castellanos at quarterback position. He left when he lost his starting job to Grayson James, and Grayson James has completed 64% of his passes for 901 yards, 6 touchdowns, and he's taking care of the ball too, only throwing 2 interceptions. So, yeah, Tim, what do you know about Grayson James? He's a transfer. He spent 3 or 4 years, I think, at Florida International. He's a Texas guy, Duncanville.
Yeah, one of those guys that you kind of forget he was at Duncanville. Duncanville's had such an impressive run
Yeah.
of quarterbacks that James
Hmm.
kind of snuck in there, but it has made himself a little bit of a college career.
Yeah.
Going around at FIU, now at Boston College. Playing quality minutes. A guy like you said, efficient, takes care of the football. But he's a guy that, even dating back to FIU and even Duncanville, if you get him off his rhythm, he's a guy that can turn the ball over.
Yeah.
Especially if he's got, you get some pressure on him, you make him a little uncomfortable. He's a guy that, it kind of snowballs, I guess, is the best way to put it. A guy that's typically efficient, can suddenly, we saw this at Duncanville, we saw this at Florida International, can suddenly turn from, one interception turns into two or three, and all of a sudden you're behind the sticks. And so that's the big thing, I think, for Nebraska, is establishing pressure and making him feel uncomfortable, so he kind of regresses into and makes some of those mistakes that he's been prone to make at previous stops along his way in his career.
You're absolutely right, because 2 seasons ago, when he was starting for Florida International, he threw 11 touchdowns, but also 11 interceptions, and he didn't even complete 60% of his passes. So, Tim, you're right. If you get him off rhythm, there's potential for him to help out a defense by throwing it to him. His top target, Lewis Bond, 5'11", 199 pounds, out of Chicago. He has 60 receptions for 590 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's going to be a top target. So Sierra Wright's probably going to be on him for a majority of the game. And you know, I like Nebraska's defense here against Boston College. Boston College's offense, if they can stop that run, that's going to be coming right
Yeah.
at them, and that's
This is
just
going
going
to
to be
be
the game right
For
there.
sure. I think this is the same game plan as Wisconsin, similar game plan to Iowa, where
Yep.
you limit the run and you line up one on one. And I think Nebraska has the personnel in the back end to match up with this specific pass catching group.
Yeah.
And up front, if they're able to get some pressure on Grayson James. Again, I think it's like we said for Wisconsin, like we said for Iowa. You kind of have to make Grayson James beat you. Kind of have to make the quarterback beat you.
Yes.
And if Nebraska
Yes.
can get there, I think you should feel good about their chances of winning it, unless, it goes completely, awry like the Iowa game did, where, 3 games essentially cost them, 3 plays essentially cost them that potential win when they had dominated most of that game. Steve, that'll probably do it for us here.
Mhm.
The Nebraska Football Show. Been a while since we've done one of these, like a longer form version of this, so it's been good to kind of talk ball. We'll have a full, off season to kind of discuss all of these, roster moves and what this roster is going to evolve and look like. So many more changes are going to come. We're just through the first phase of the winter transfer portal window. There's still 2 more technical phases we're going to get
Mhm.
to before the end of January. And then we have the spring transfer window. So there's going to be a lot of changes around here. And so we'll be back later this week with our bold predictions for, the game. Could potentially not expecting a recruiting blitz this week just because, not a whole lot of visits happening this week. I feel like I've touched on most everything across radio and on platform, but we'll be back next week. Enjoy the holidays. Happy holidays, everybody. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Yeah, that'll probably do it for us. And before we get out of here, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel. The best Christmas gift you could get us is 15K followers, 15K subscribers. We'd like to get there soon. Maybe not by Christmas, but we'd like to get there. So do your part to help us get there.
Tim Claus. I like it. Santa Claus from Tim over here. Okay. Yeah. We'll see you, Tim. It was fun. Let's do it again soon.
Yes, sir.